Hello, everyone. Thank you and welcome to this training, what to know before starting the special education process. This training is facilitated by Disability Rights California. We have an excellent lawyer who's going to give us the presentation of our rights and what to do when you guys are beginning to start thinking about requesting an assessment, going through the whole process, and if it's actually special education right for your child. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm my coordinator today. I am Patricia Idrugo, Family Resource Center Supervisor of San Mateo County, and I have with me today Gabriela Diaz-Santos. And we just want to welcome you and then want to be mindful that we are recording this training for obviously for purposes to benefit all the families that listen and sometimes cannot attend these live meetings. But we're saving it so because we want to be able that we preserve some information for future reference. I would like to just express my gratitude to Disability Rights California for being here today, taking some time off your busy schedule so that we can encourage parents to learn more about the rights and how to advocate for their children. I do want to be able to share, I was going to share a PowerPoint, but I'm just going to go ahead and paste it in the chat, or just basic generic information about how you guys can connect with us. And you can definitely visit our website. We work Monday to Friday. We have a location physical in Burlingame in California, but we're working remotely at this moment, 9 to 5, and that's our phone number. We have an email where you guys can reach out. Providers are welcome to reach out to us, call us, send us an email. Families also as well. We do have at the moment 2 support groups, one in Spanish that we meet the second Tuesday of every month in the mornings at 10 in the morning. And then we have an autism support group and we meet the first Tuesday of the month. And this is facilitated by one of the therapists from Star Vista, Diane Blank. And we meet every first Tuesday of the month at 6:30 p.m. If you guys want to take a look at the trainings and events we have planned for the rest of the summer, visit our website that is available at the location at the link that I just pasted in the chat. And then I think I'm done with my part, and I'm gonna let Disability Rights and Lani to introduce her team today.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Welcome, everyone. My name is Lani Pfeiffer. I'm with Disability Rights California. Your presenter this evening is Maria Urarty, our senior attorney, and Mary Rios, our senior advocate, who will talk about things you should know before beginning the special ed process. But before we get started, I just wanted to share about our services. We were formerly known as Protection and Advocacy. We're a nonprofit agency that federally is mandated to provide legal services for people with disabilities. We work on issues such as special education, public benefits, regional center services, housing, employment, mental health services, and so forth. We have offices in Sacramento, Los Angeles, Bay Area, San Diego, and then our smaller offices are in Fresno, Ontario, and Modesto. If you have any questions, we will pause from time to time so that you can ask your question for confidentiality reasons. We will pause it and then resume once we begin again. But you can certainly type your questions in the chat. We'll monitor that and ask. You can also raise your hand or unmute yourself when we pause. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our team. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lani. Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Rios. I'm one of the senior advocates. And as Lani said, today we're going to present on things you should know when preparing or when you're getting ready to start and learn about the special education process. And these are key issues that I think are really important. As Lani said, if you have any questions, enter them in the chat. We will try to get to all the questions. I'm also going to include my information in the chat. If you would like an appointment to speak about special education issues, please feel free to reach out to me. I have included that in the chat. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Maria.
Thank you, Mary. So good evening, everyone. So today we're going to just learn some basic things that you should know when you're starting the special education process. We're going to look patterns to look for, what the learning process is, what assessments are and how to request an assessment. We'll have a sample letter of that, a sample of an assessment plan. If you're not happy with the assessment result, you might want to ask for an independent educational evaluation, and there's a sample letter. We're going to talk about least restrictive environment and free and appropriate public education. We have a sheet that gives tips to parents, a sample letter on requesting an independent evaluation plan meeting. And then lastly, terms you should know and list of internet resources. So patterns to look for when your child as your child is developing. So this is just a list for you to have. I'm not going to go through all of them, but things to, it's important what this says here. It's important to separate occasional from persistent behavior, right? And not to worry so much about isolated incidents. But, if you start to see things, for example, in infancy, maybe trouble with nursing, sucking, or digesting, maybe absence of creeping or crawling, resistance to cuddling and body contact, lack of response to sounds, excessive response to sounds, delay in learning to talk, things like that. Those could be signs that maybe the child is not developing like a typical child is, that maybe there may be an issue or issues. In this preschool years, maybe the inability to follow directions, unusually quiet or inactive, excessive craving for sweets, crying and undisturbed sleep, poor eating habits, constantly interrupting and persistent chatter. And there are more things. Excuse me. In the school years, perhaps restlessness, difficulty with using fine motor skills, or for example, maybe using the pencil or an eraser, or maybe difficulty cutting scissors, clumsiness and awkwardness in throwing and catching balls, trouble with playing games and following the rules, a confused sense of time or distance, maybe difficulty expressing ideas, erratic schoolwork, uneven performance in testing. So these are just things that to look for, right? Because unless you know about a typical development of a child, perhaps you've had other children and you know what a typical development is for a child, you might miss some of these perhaps warning signs that maybe something needs to be looked at.
Maria,
Yep.
I also, if I may, I also wanted to add that some parents may identify these things, and there's also the Early Start program at the regional center, so you may already be receiving some services from the regional center. So I just wanted to throw that in because it kind of ties into what Maria is saying and also the next section that she's going to cover.
Yes, good. Yes, your child may already be receiving Early Start services from the regional center. They are not regional center clients at that point. Regional center clients start at the age of 3. Typically at the age of 3. So yeah, this may be something that you've probably, if your child is in Early Start, some issues have been identified, and it's, to work on the challenges the child is having early on for, better results in the future. As far as testing, the different kinds of tests that are out there, we're sometimes asked, well, what are all the assessments that we can ask for? Well, there are a lot of assessments out there, and sometimes we say to people, look, it's not it's not so important if you don't know what the assessment may be called. It's not so important what the name of it is. What's important is that you describe to the IEP team what you observe or you're not observing, right? And maybe by describing your concerns, you know, the test is, they'll figure out what the test is. Excuse me. So, excuse me, I have to take a drink of water. So we have a list of tests. So for example, cognition and intelligence, meaning the ability to reason, think abstractly, and to solve problems. You have a list of tests that can test for that. Ability to use cognitive processes which do not rely on verbal language. You've got tests like this. So this is how you read this document. If I don't know the majority of what these tests are, but what I can do is I can, for example, look up this test for language development and figure out what it does and what it's actually focused on trying to determine, right? Auditory comprehension and language. So we have a lot of tests here. Auditory skills, what kinds of tests there are for auditory skills, visual skills, the tests that are available for visual skills, motor skills, the different tests that are available for motor skills, social and emotional adjustment tests, and we've got all of that. Mary, which is the one that the school uses a lot, the psychosocial?
The psychoeducational evaluation, it basically covers the majority of the tests that you're describing here.
Yeah.
So it's called the psychoeducational evaluation. And then if the parents feel that they need some additional tests, such as like occupational therapy, physical therapy, those additional evaluations can be requested. But these are typically the included in the psychoeducational evaluation.
Mm-hmm. Academic skills and achievement processing. So there is just, as you can see, a whole host of different tests that are available. If you suspect that your child may require, you know, you suspect something and that may require, and you want the school to look to see if your child qualifies for special education, you can write a sample letter to the director of special ed at your local school district. And this is a sample letter. You can say, my son, Max, I want you to assess him to determine if he's eligible for special ed services and supports. Maybe the reason why you feel that this is, you could give a reason for why you think that the child needs to be evaluated for special education services. If you, and it says here, if you believe that your child may be eligible for particular categories, such as other health impairment, like the disability that would qualify the child for special education or emotional disturbance or autism, then you should, you could talk about it here, and that you want certain evaluations to happen, right, for determining whether your child should be a special ed student, and that you request also that they evaluate under Section 504 of the Rehab Act. This is for accommodations in school. Perhaps your child uses a wheelchair and needs a desk that will accommodate the wheelchair so that he can, have proper seating. That would be a request for a reasonable accommodation, and just information on the law that allows you to ask for this, and that you look forward to receiving an assessment plan in 15 days pursuant to the education code. so, you know, there are deadlines for things to happen. If you're not familiar with eligibility requirements for special education, we have on our website a manual called the Rights Under the Special Ed Education Rights and Responsibilities Manual. And we're going to take you to that a little later. But there's a whole chapter on eligibility, what disabilities qualify a child for special education, what the other requirements are. So it's, you know, it's important that you also educate yourself about, you know, and look at that manual, because there's a lot of information that pertains to students who are in special education.
Maria, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have a little bit of comments in the chat already. Do you want to address those now, or you want to just?
No, I'm going to just finish the section I'm going to finish, and then I'll stop for questions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks. We have a sample assessment plan from a school district in Santa Clara County. So this is what it could look like. It could be a bit different, but it'll say this, if this is the initial assessment, annual, triannual, general information on the parent, then the language, that's the primary language, the student, the parent signs, teacher signs, everyone signs, and maybe the reason for the referral for the assessment. Now, these are different assessments that they can do, and the school will check off the assessments that they plan to do. This is the assessment plan, right? And if you feel that there are other assessments that should be happening, you would check off other and include those assessments here. The last column here will tell you who they plan to do the assessment, who's the person who's going to do the assessment. Down at the bottom, you have a checkbox to consent to the assessments, or you do not consent to the proposed assessments above, or that you would like the following assessment information to be considered by the IEP team. You sign and date, additional comments if you want. But just know that you're going to have an opportunity, if you're not happy with the results of the assessment, to request an independent evaluation. And we'll talk about that a little later.
Can I add something just in the bottom in terms of comments?
Mm-hmm.
We typically advise parents when they get the assessment plan that they should include down at the bottom in the comments that they should please provide copies of the assessment reports at least 5 days before the IEP meeting. That's really important because you want to have the opportunity to review the assessments before the IEP meeting. Some districts are just set on giving you copies there at the IEP meeting, but I think it's important to review those assessments beforehand.
There's just no way that you're going to have the time to really digest the information in the assessments when you're having the IEP meeting. So that's really good advice, is to get those assessments, the results, right? The assessment reports prior to the meeting with the IEP team. Now, if you're not happy with the results of the assessment, you can ask for an independent educational evaluation, and this is a sample letter to the director of special ed in your local school district. You know, here it says, we've received the psychological evaluation for our son, which was completed by the district personnel. We disagree with the findings and recommendations. Because we disagree, we'd like to have an independent assessment at public expense, meaning that it shouldn't cost you anything, pursuant to this California Education Code. And if you believe an independent evaluation is needed, you should give a brief description of current functioning and suspected disability for your child. You don't have to, but you can if you want. State the reasons why you're disagreeing with the assessments. And here are some examples of reasons for disagreement. And federal regulations require that you respond to our requests without unnecessary delay. We look forward to working with you. Now, the school has two options when you ask for an IEE, an independent educational evaluation. It can say, yes, we're going to go ahead and approve this. And they typically have lists of evaluators that you can choose from, but you don't have to choose from their list of evaluators. You can go outside the list and find your own evaluator. But beware, you also need to understand what the school district would typically pay for that kind of evaluator. So we had a client who called us because she had been approved to get an IEE for her son, and she went out and hired an independent evaluator, not from the list that the school provided, but outside the list. And I'm going to make it up because it was somewhere around here. I think it was $7,000 to $8,000 is what the evaluator charged her for the evaluation in the report. And she went to the district to get reimbursed, and the district said, no, we typically pay for this kind of evaluation $5,000, and that's all we're going to pay. So she was stuck having to pay the difference between the $5,000 the district typically pays and what her evaluator charged her. So you don't want to find yourself in that predicament. You need to make sure that you speak to the district and get the information so you know how much they typically pay for that kind of evaluator. Mary, did you want to add anything?
You covered it, Maria.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and stop and see if there are any questions or comments. Move on with least restrictive environment, and I'm going to hand this over to Mary.
Thank you, Maria. So we're going to talk about the least restrictive environment. Here we have this graphic that on the left side you see inclusion, on the right side you see special classes or special education classes. The goal here, when you have your initial IEP, when appropriate, to place the child in the least restrictive environment, which means that the child should be included whenever appropriate in regular education classes, and they should describe that on the IEP. In some cases, the regular education class is not appropriate, so they have to look at other placements such as special day class. And depending on what the disabilities are, the disability is, sometimes the child can be placed in a residential placement, but that is the most restrictive environment. So again, the goal here is many times when you have your initial IEP, school districts will say, well, we'll place the child in special day class. That doesn't necessarily have to be that way. They should include the child in general ed with typical peers whenever possible. And you can also look at it like maybe 40% in general ed, 60% in special day class. You can actually maneuver the percentage around whenever it's appropriate. So one of the things that we like to emphasize is the least restrictive environment.
Mary,
yes.
I have a question. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
It's
so
okay.
What you're saying is it's not a one or the other. So it could be a combination of regular ed class, maybe with pullout for something. But the goal is, and this is federal law and state law that says that the district needs to consider the least restrictive environment first and show why that's not possible in this case, right?
That's correct, Maria. That's correct. And if you honestly feel that your child should be in a regular education class, there is what's called inclusion specialist, where you can ask for an assessment by an inclusion specialist. The inclusion specialist will do an assessment to determine what placement is appropriate for the child. So, and then they look at the academic instruction based on state standards in the general ed class. In special education classes, they look at additional services provided to students as required by their IEPs. Remember, their IEPs are their individual educational plans, and they're based on the supports and services that the child needs. So that can include behavior intervention supports, but the child, if the child is also in general ed, they can include the accommodations, modifications, behavior intervention plans as well. So again, like Maria said, it's not just one or not, you know, you wanna make sure that you identify the child's strengths, the weaknesses, and discuss that at the IEP meeting.
So Mary, if the parent's not happy with what the inclusion specialist says about placement, you can ask for an IEE, right? For
That's
that.
correct, Maria.
Okay. And at the end of the day, if the district and the parent they're still arguing over placement, the option is go to due process, right?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Maria.
Mhm.
Here we have indicators of fully inclusive programs for students with disabilities. Again, students move with peers. They should move with peers to, you know, subsequent grades in school. No special class exists except as a place for enrichment activities. So again, whenever possible, the child should be placed in the least restrictive environment. So here's some.
Yeah, there's it just sort of tells you what it means, right? To be fully to be a child with a disability that's fully included. Yeah.
So I will let you all read all this information. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but again, I just want to emphasize the least restrictive environment and inclusion. The child should be included whenever possible. This is the 17 tips that we have for getting quality special education and preparing for the IEP. These are, I think, really good items that the parent should prepare for. Organize your child's IEP records. If you don't have any IEP records, I think it's really important. If your child is a regional center client, or if they were receiving early start services, if you have records from the providers that you think may assist you at the initial IEP, or if you have a report from the providers, I think it's important to review those. Those may also help in receiving the services and supports that the child needs. Request assessments. And like Maria said, if you don't know the name of the assessment, discuss what's happening with the child, and the school district may identify the type of assessment that is needed. If the child is nonverbal, or if they need assistive technology. There's augmentative communication devices where the school district can also do the assistive technology evaluation to determine whether the child can benefit from assistive technology. So I think that's really important as well. Ask for the assessment reports a week before the IEP meeting. Again, you want to make sure that you review them in their entirety. If you're going to the IEP meeting, take a friend with you. At least take a friend to support you. If English isn't your primary language, and if English isn't your primary language, you definitely want to invite somebody, and if that person speaks to both languages, you want to make sure that the interpreter that they have is doing the interpreting appropriately. There have been situations where the interpreter doesn't interpret what's being said, but you just want to make sure that, if you can, take somebody for support. Read all the assessment reports, identify your aims for the IEP meeting. Again, review your child's current IEP goals and all progress reports if you have one. If not, identify your child's strengths and their weaknesses. Look at the evaluations to determine where your child is, because the assessments are going to drive the supports and services that your child needs. And that's really important.
Okay.
Yeah, here we have make a list of points that you want to discuss at the meeting. Sometimes as parents, we're ready to go into the meeting. I think it's really important to have a list of things that you want to discuss. If you don't take something in writing, you should, because we tend to forget. We're so overwhelmed with all the information we're going to receive, and I think it's important to have things in writing. You can also submit a written notice to record the IEP meeting, as long as you give them written notice 24 hours in advance. You cannot do the video recording, but you can certainly do the audio. During the IEP meeting, again, bring a friend or a person who knows your child. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and make sure you understand any jargon. It's really important that you ask questions if you don't understand what the IEP team is saying. Discuss the present levels of your child's performance. Develop annual IEP goals, and make sure to set appropriate goals. Progress monitoring also, that's really important. Setting the goals is really key, because you want to make sure that your child, that they're implementing goals that are appropriate goals. Sometimes the goals may be too easy for the child, and the school wants to keep those goals. If you know that your child can reach that goal, you wanna include a higher goal, something that your child is able to complete.
Mary, can I just
Of course.
add, we had a parent when we were doing one of these trainings. She said that her son actually thrived during COVID because he loved to be at home, and he was doing really well in school, special ed. He was doing it all from school. He was doing really well. He surpassed the goals. And so now she had an IEP meeting, and the school wanted to give the child the same goals. And mom is saying, wait a minute, my son can do more than this. And she was arguing, and at the time of the training was still arguing with the school about the goals, because she said, no, he can do more than this, and it's proven. So it's really important to do that. Now, monitoring progress, it's really important in your IEP that you include how that's going to happen, right, Mary?
That's correct, Marie. I think it's really important in the IEP. You want to ask the IEP team, how are you gonna report to me how my child is doing, whether he's on track to meet these goals. You want to make sure that they're documenting and providing those reports. Identify full inclusion or integration opportunities and the supports needed for success. The child may need a study buddy, somebody from general ed. I mean, these are things, not everything is written in stone. So parents can think outside the box to see what works for your child, and discuss at the IEP team meeting. I think it's really important. Describe the placement for your child and identify specific related services and supports. There's modifications that can be done, accommodations. They can modify homework. If your child is in general ed and that homework, it's too much homework, you can ask that they reduce it some. I mean, that's a modification that the school district can do. Sign the IEP only if you are satisfied and you agree to the IEP meeting. If you agree with the placement, the supports and services, goals and objectives, you can sign it. But if there's some sections that you agree to and there's other sections that you disagree to, you want to document that on the IEP. You can partially sign. After the IEP meeting, if possible, be involved in your child's classroom and school. Sometimes school districts or schools don't allow parents to come in. But that's something that you definitely want to try to do. Support your child in developing friendships with classmates, and monitor again your child's progress. I think it's really key. And think about options, options if things don't work out. You want to, if something doesn't work out for your child, if something needs to be changed, you as a parent have the right to request an IEP meeting at any time. The school district sometimes will say, well, you have to wait until next year. No, you don't. You can request an IEP meeting in writing, and they have to hold an IEP meeting within 30 days. That's really important. Here we have here we have the sample on how to request an IEP meeting. It basically says your child is attending the school, and identify whatever the issue is with your child that you want to discuss, and that you're requesting an IEP meeting. And here we have the education code. You can include that too, and request that they provide you a meeting date within 30 days.
They're also requesting a behavioral assessment too.
Yes,
in this one.
yes. And you can do that. If you're requesting that, if you're thinking about requesting an assessment, I think that you should include that in your request for an IEP meeting, because you want to make sure that they have the assessment plan ready at the IEP meeting.
Right, because there are times, right? They have 15 days to come up
That's
with
correct.
the plan, and then 60 days to do the assessment, have the IEP to talk about the assessment. So we're going to stop right now because the next couple of sections are just terms you should know and resources, and we're going to go quickly through that. So we're going to go ahead and quickly go through this because you're going to go through this. So we just compiled, we compiled a list of special ed terms that we think you should know. Lots of acronyms, right? So what is IDEA? That's the federal law for kids who are in special education, students with disabilities, agencies you should know about: California Children's Services, the California Department of Education, Commission on Teacher Credentialing, DDS, Department of Developmental Services, etc. Office of Administrative Hearings, this is the office that hears special education due process appeals, and also Regional Center appeals, the Office of Administrative Hearings, Office of Civil Rights. If you feel that the school has discriminated against your child based on disability, let's say, for example, your child's class is going on a field trip and they're going to go hike in the mountains, and the school says to you, your kid can't go because he's in a wheelchair and he can't, he's not something that they feel would be safe for him, and no one's there to really help. That would be a complaint that you could file with the Office of Civil Rights, because the school is discriminating, not allowing your child to participate like other children do based on the disability. Our Office of Client Rights Advocacy, they're our sister organization. They do not work for the Regional Center, but they advocate for Regional Center clients, or people who want to become Regional Center clients. State Council on Developmental Disabilities, an independent state agency that assures that people with developmental disabilities in their family receives these supports and services they need. Different tests, you've got information there. The laws, the Americans with Disabilities Act also prohibits discrimination based on disability, as does the Rehabilitation Act of Section 504 of that act. Compliance complaint, we've mentioned compliance complaints, but there's a definition here. Public Records Act request: as a citizen in California, you can request public records from different agencies, and there's a process to do that anyway. More here. So I'm not going to go through all of this. There's lots here. And then a list of internet resources. This is broken down by chapters in our SIR manual. So a lot of different resources. This is on basic rights and responsibilities, and special ed, information on evaluations and assessments, eligibility, the IEP process. And this is how our chapters in our manual are divided. So you've got that information. What we'd like to do now is go to our website so we can show you our manual and our publications on special education. So this is our website. Up above, you see select language. So you can actually change the language of the website to the language that you want. So for example, Lonnie just changed it to Spanish, but we're going to go back to English so that you can see. so that I can see. So we go to resources, and that's where we have all of our publications. And again, you can select the language in the middle of the screen, up in the top part of the middle. But then you see that all of our publications are divided into topics. So if you scroll down to special education, you're going to see what we have. So we have different toolkits: basic special education toolkit, behavior and discipline toolkit, when you have disagreements with the district toolkit, extended year toolkit. And you can scroll down and you'll see we have topics on, we have publications on specific topics, right? Transition services for kids when they're turned 16, what's that all about, etc. But we also have bullying and harassment. And on the left-hand side, up above, you're going to see that we have our two manuals under, if you scroll down. Well, it's down there, but you also can find it where we were before. So the Special Education Rights and Responsibilities Manual is there, but Lonnie, can you go back to the resources and go to special ed so we can show them where it is also? Thank you. So we go back to the special ed. And then we've got the toolkits, but on the left-hand side, we also have the manuals. We've got our Special Education Rights and Responsibilities Manual right down here. One more. Yeah, so, right. No, but what I'd like you to do is go, yes. Could you just go back to where we were with all of the publications for special ed? Okay, let's go back to resources. And so on the left-hand side, if you scroll down, you'll see we have two manuals: the Special Education Rights and Responsibilities Manual right on the left-hand side. No, not there. As you scroll down, there we go. And that will take you also to our manual. And then you see on the left-hand side, we have chapters. So we have chapters, we talked about the chapter 6 on due process and compliance complaint procedures. And if you see, or if you look at our manual, all our manuals are rights under the Lanterman Act manual for regional center clients and our special ed manual. The format is question, answer. And for every answer, we cite to the law, whether it be federal law, state law, maybe there's case law. So if we open up, what is due process? What is a compliance? Whichever one you want. So it tells you what a due process hearing is. And then you go to the next question. What is a compliance complaint? It tells you what a compliance complaint is, and then so forth. So you scroll down on the left side for questions. And then at the end of the manual, we have an appendix with sample letters of things. So if we go down to our appendix, I think you have to get out of, yeah, there you go. Yeah, appendix. We have sample referral for an assessment, a sample request of records, IEE, sample letter to request an IEP, a sample compliance complaint, sample request for mediation or due process. Once your child turns 18, you really have no right to be in an IEP meeting unless you have a legal document that allows you to. So that's would be Appendix P is the letter that your child would sign giving you the right to continue to be present at IEPs. And this is legal. The schools have to accept this. You don't need a limited conservatorship. You don't need a power of attorney. You don't need a full conservatorship. You can just do it with this letter. And then,
I'm sorry. I was going to say, can we go back, Lonnie, and show the sample compliance complaint?
So it would be in the appendix.
There, yeah, there we go. So here's your sample of the compliance complaint. Can you scroll down a little bit? And I think here you have to also include what's happening. I think that what happens when you file a compliance complaint, the California Department of Education, they do their investigation, and if they find that the school district failed to comply with what they were supposed to, they ask them to do what's called a corrective action plan, and they may themselves include that they owe, for example, compensatory services.
Yeah. And there's a whole, we have information on what in our manual on what compensatory services are. So my advice, and I know Mary would say the same, is if you're not quite sure whether the school is telling you the correct information, whether they're complying with the deadlines and what the law says about special education processes and procedures, look at our manual. Start with our manual. And if you still need more information, give us a call. But, you know, the manual has a lot of information already there.
And if I may add, Marie, I think one of the key takeaway things, and I think one of the most important things, is make sure that you put everything in writing. Even if you receive a call, follow up with an email per our conversation or per your call. This is what I understand. Is this correct? I mean, you wanna save whatever documentation, you wanna document what is happening. So I think it's really important to create your paper trail.
Yes, I agree. So we also have a manual for people who are regional center clients, or we want to become regional center clients, and that's our rights under the Lanterman Act manual. The Lanterman Act is the state law that established what we know to be the regional center system in California. If you move to another state, there's not going to be a Lanterman Act. There may be some supports and services for people with developmental disabilities, but I don't know of anything better than what we have in California. And so that's the manual, and the manual also is in question answer format. You know, eligibility, regional centers, IPPs, individual program plans, advocating for yourself, services, community living, etc. Appeals, complaints. If you're in disagreement with the regional center, what do you do? Thank you, Lonnie. So we have come to the end of our presentation. Are there any questions, comments?
Thank you very much for participating in this training, for the providers who attended and the parents who are here with us tonight. Thank you, Disability Rights California, Mary, Maria, Lonnie, and your team for being here. And thank you for the interpreters also for, you know, monitoring and helping the families who selected Spanish. I'm looking forward for our next trainings. If you guys have any questions, you're more than welcome to connect with us through the email. Tomorrow I'll send a follow-up with all the resources and links that Disability Rights will be forwarding to me, and then I'll share all of that information with you guys. Thank you so much, and I hope that you have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you,
Thank
Lonnie.
you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
interpreters.
Lonnie.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Wonderful. Wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much.